Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. I'm Noam Blum, CTO and producer of the Commentary Podcast. And we're going to be doing a Mailbag episode. So with me is commentary editor John Podhoretz. Hi, John.
Hi, Noam.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, Noam.
And I don't remember
Executive
Abe's
editor.
title. Executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe. See, this is the part that I didn't work on.
It's all good. Hi, Noam.
Also, before we start, I just want to remind everybody to go to iTunes and give us a 5-star review, and also like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's just the best way to grow the pod and show us that you're a supporter. So we're going to just jump into some mailbag questions for you guys and see how many we can get through. The first one is from Declan, who asks, why are leading pro-Israel figures and politicians seemingly reluctant to make the hard-headed geostrategic case for the U.S.-Israel alliance and for the Iran war?
Okay, so I'll just jump in and say I don't think that anybody is reluctant to make that case. I think that it was thought for a long time that talking about the cultural, political, historical, and even theological similarities between the United States and Israel was a more serious, more profound, and more emotionally resonant claim to make about the U.S.-Israel relationship. But I'm not aware of anybody who thinks that sort of thing who can't also make an argument that this relationship is mutually beneficial. 40, 50 years ago, that was much less the case because Israel didn't have that much to offer the United States, except being the sole democracy in the Middle East and therefore the most trustworthy ally that the United States would have. But certainly in the last 30 years and with the development of Israel's remarkable, not only military, but technological capabilities and capacities, it has become a partner in understanding how to conduct warfare. It has Israel's amazing intelligence services have supplied us with completely invaluable information on what is going on in the world that Israel has a window on that we do not have a window on. And so I think that argument is certainly, I'm not aware that anybody isn't making it. The older you are, the more you made the moral and structural case, and I think in the last 20 years, the case that Israel is the most useful ally in some ways that we have, most practical ally, is almost unassailable.
John, can I add something to that? I agree with everything you said. I do think there's a sense now in which if you find yourself defending the U.S.-Israel relationship, you're speaking to someone who's not going to be persuaded. You're kind of playing their game already, because as you say, to me, it's so self-evident what a strong and valuable relationship this is for the U.S. that you're sort of being asked to do something slightly absurd. So I feel that more and more. Doesn't mean I don't make the case. Doesn't mean I can't. Doesn't mean we all can. But there is that sense in which you're not dealing with a force that's persuadable at the moment.
I'd just quickly add to that, and then we can move on. That the people who are not persuadable probably have a much different view of what alliances are, or what the United States needs from its connections abroad, and that very much has to do with your the ideological and internationalist framework that you have. If you believe that what's important is American projection of power and the maintenance of world order in which America is the leading power, then obviously a nation that helps America hold that position, maintain that position, and strengthen that position is an invaluable ally. If, however, you believe that America's international connections should be more in the lines of multilateralist some surrender of American sovereignty and American purpose to global causes like global warming, for example, or international treaties or something like that, then the argument that this relation with this one nation is of particular value is just not something you're going to believe necessarily, because you probably think that that leads the United States into being warlike and belligerent and confrontational, and what it really should be is apologetic and interweave itself into a community of nations, none of which is any better or worse than we are.
Okay, we can move on to the next question. Dean Brown, who says we could all use a laugh in these challenging and confusing times, asks, what is the funniest moment you can remember in politics?
The funniest scene that I can conjure, and maybe I've said this before, so I apologize if it is, but it remains the funniest scene that I can conjure in my memory, is just before the signing of the Oslo Accords. There was a great disruption among Bill Clinton's team, because Yasser Arafat was a terrorist still at the time. And I mean, he lived and died a terrorist, but he was considered a terrorist at the time. And there was this idea that the president of the United States cannot shake his hand and cannot show him any warmth. And so Bill Clinton's staff, now the problem is that Arafat was very famously affectionate. He wanted to draw you in. He wanted to give you a hug. He wanted to give you a kiss. He wanted to do all these things. And so there was a moment before the ceremony when they were deciding how to handle everything, where Bill Clinton's staff was walking him through how to shake. Oh, so I'm sorry. He could shake hands, but he couldn't hug him. That was the thing. How to shake hands with Arafat without being pulled in to an Arafat hug. And so Clinton's team, they had practiced among themselves, and there was this scene of advisors shaking hands with each other and nodding heads and figuring out how physically to have a handshake that could not turn into a hug. And they decided on, you shake with your right hand, you put your left hand on the other person's right shoulder, and it stops their momentum from being able to turn and throw their arms around you. And so first, for a while, Bill Clinton's advisors did this little show for him where they all shook hands with their hands on the other guy's shoulders, and they demonstrated how to do this dance for the president of the United States so he didn't accidentally hug a terrorist. And then Clinton had to practice, and you had to practice with the president, shaking hands with him, where the president of the United States was going to try to hug you, and you had to physically stop the president from being able to hug you. And that was how they taught Bill Clinton how to handle the handshake, hug, kiss, whatever situation with Arafat. And then, of course, when the actual moment happened, you can see it play out in real time. And if you knew the scene beforehand, there was a great moment of tension among everybody in the administration. It was like the live performance of this thing that they had been rehearsing. So that to me, the scene of how to just show just enough respect but no affection to Arafat when you knew the guy was going to bring you in for a hug and a kiss, that dance to me has always been very funny.
I got two. One, George W. Bush in debate with with Al Gore in 2000. And the debate, I think they had three debates, but the debate was a more informal, like they were standing and answering questions with an audience, I think, in the round. And so Gore took this moment when he wanted to try to break Bush or get him to stumble or do something, and this was obviously very planned. He walked from his area over to where Bush was as Bush was speaking. So Bush is speaking and Gore starts moving toward him and moves like a foot or two from Bush's face as he is talking. And Bush simply turned and nodded like, "Hey, how are you?" and then continued on speaking. And the audience burst into laughter because Bush, with that one gesture, completely neutralized whatever psychological game Gore was trying to play with him. And so that's someone that sticks in my head as a totally spontaneous, clever, natural, and therefore amusing response. And the other is Ronald Reagan's incredible crack at the second debate with Walter Mondale, after he had done terribly in the first debate and raised questions about whether or not he was mentally infirm, where asked if he were too old, or what about, he said he would not, Reagan said he would not, capitalize on the youth and inexperience of his opponent, Walter Mondale, who was himself in his 60s. So those were the two best comic moments I can think of.
The head nod was on my short list, by the way, John.
Mine is more recent than all these. Sometime during I think it was during the Trump's first campaign, the 2016 campaign for the presidency, and some polling came out about his popularity among non-college educated Americans, and he was asked to comment on it, and he said, "I love the uneducated," and makes me laugh still. It's a very silly one, but hey, or a telling one.
Okay.
All right. Moving on to less funny topics, unfortunately. Laura asks, if Bibi loses the election, will that do anything to tamp down the rise of anti-Semitism, since he seems to personify Israel to so many of these haters?
No.
No. And it's important to make a distinction here. There may be changes in criticism of Israel or how it's expressed, at least in a honeymoon period or whatever. But I like to be clear on this. Anti-Semitism is not coming because of anything that Israel is doing. And so the feeling of anti-Semitism, the belief in the conspiracy theories, whatever it is, that will not go anywhere, whether it's expressed in certain or different ways or whatever. Israel can do things to not be criticized maybe as much as like any nation can, just like we can. But Israel cannot stop anti-Semitism by acting differently.
Yeah, I agree entirely. It kind of goes back to my earlier point about making the argument about the importance of the practical importance of the U.S.-Israel alliance. People, the overwhelming recent animus toward Israel, no matter what people say or even may think their reasons are, they're not rational.
I will add one thing, and this is very much interior or internal to the Jewish community, particularly in the United States. There will be a honeymoon period should Bibi lose, where liberal Jews and American Jews who have decided they don't like Netanyahu will feel very relieved that he is no longer an albatross around their neck and that they have to defend him when obviously he is so hated and hateful, and they all whine and complain about him and have been for, upwards of 2 decades. And that'll last 3 or 4 months. And then something will happen that the left will characterize or portray as some horrible act of Israeli perfidy under whoever is the new prime minister. And that relief that they experience will then require them to formulate a defense or a justification for this new prime minister that they like. And I'm going to guess that that's going to be hard for them, because it's not that they hate Bibi. A lot of Israelis hate Bibi, and there's a lot of reasons to dislike Bibi. They don't like that they have to, they blame him for how defensive they are about him. But that's going to happen inevitably, regardless of who the prime minister is.
Okay, we can move on to the next questions from Ruth in San Francisco, who says, I live in an extremely blue part of the United States, and I occasionally catch myself wishing I had more progressive views, just to fit in with the apparent consensus around me at social gatherings, during random interactions with people while out and about, etc. Do any of you ever feel the same way? I can jump in if to
Go ahead.
answer this.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. My life is spent in liberal circles. I went to a music college. Many of the hobbies that you can see in the background behind me, if you're watching this on YouTube, are parts of subcultures that are heavily liberal and progressive. And it's not so much that I find myself wishing that I were more progressive. I find myself wishing that progressives or liberals were more like what they said they were, which would have naturally made me more like them. So it's not so much that I want to be a progressive, but if a progressive behaves like, or claims to be humanist and loving, but then go out and they behave in ways that are in complete contradiction to that, I wish they were more like what they said they were, rather than me wanting to be more like them.
I mean, I think that's a great answer. I think the answer is that it's absolutely human nature to want to live in consensus agreement with the people who surround you. I too live in and around far more liberal people than I am, but I have my entire life, and so I veer between thinking in an odd way that despite my attitude and the way I behave in social media and how rough and ad hominem and nasty I can be on social media, personally in my interactions with people, I largely attempt to, as they would say, model civility as a conservative to liberals, so that they understand that conservatives are civilized, nice people that you can deal with. And maybe that's a form of surrender in some ways. Like, what do I have to prove myself to them for? But I do feel that. I feel that pressure. I feel that pressure in the precincts of the families, the schooling that my kids have had in New York City and at university, and I don't want them to bear the burden of my being a controversial figure in our social circles. At the same time, I can't trim my sails or to fit the fashions of others. But I rely on the fact that because I have this forum to express myself, because I'm a writer and I have access to the public prints where I can explain how I feel, that means that things that I think Ruth from San Francisco goes through, like dinner parties or, when she's playing pickleball with her friends or something like that, these are the moments at which people who aren't writers and who don't do this for a living end up in political conversations about what's going on, at which point being silent or letting it go can seem like a form of assent or even a form of cowardice, because you're not willing to put your money where your mouth is. I think I'm very sympathetic to that kind of dilemma, because I can always step back with the understanding that, at 9:30 in the morning, I'm going to come onto this microphone and say whatever it is that I want to say, and that's not necessarily the case with others.
And also we're all in social. We all have more social interactions, we more regularly have social interactions with people who know where we stand than the average person. And so there are fewer situations where you will have a group of friends who don't know what you think about certain things. Not everything, obviously, but there's just, we run into that less. And we also, because of that, know the opinions of the people around us more. It's very difficult for any of us to be among a group of friends, not strangers, but friends who don't know how we feel about at least, the top 3 issues of the day.
Yeah, I was going to say, I actually enjoy the friction that comes from sort of being surrounded by people who largely disagree with me one way or another. Of course, when it's civil, I don't enjoy animosity, but and it's also very instructive. When you walk around and socialize in a city like New York, you pick up on sort of, the latest permutations of some liberal idea or phraseology or slogan or something, and you get a sense of, how broad an idea is, how entrenched it is. So I enjoy that. On the friends point is interesting because I have a lot of old friends, and they're pretty much evenly split, I think, but sort of left and right. And among the ones who are liberal, some or something, we just never talk about it. It never comes up, and I enjoy that too.
Okay, a couple more serious questions, and then maybe we can move on to more levity. Steve asks, is it a good thing for the world if the AOCs of the world were to moderate in an attempt to appeal to a broader electorate, or is it a dangerous development because it will make them appear more moderate and cast DSA positions in a warmer, softer marketing pitch, even though they actually remain committed to the causes that we view as so dangerous to the future of the U.S.? So is it a good sign that they are deleting their YouTube videos and disavowing all of their old positions, or is this a backdoor into mainstream U.S. politics?
I would say that it is, at this moment, a referendum on the American people and the American electorate. If they believe, excuse me, that they need to moderate their views and delete their TikToks and their Instagram feed and their tweets, because they understand that makes them either unelectable or places them outside the boundaries of conventional politics. I take that as a sign of American health, more generally speaking, that the guardrails haven't completely disappeared, that the lunatics aren't running the asylum. At the same time, I am sympathetic with Steve's concern that that this is Trojan horsery, that they are pretending to be something that they're not, and then they take power. And then they start implementing agendas that are just as horrifying as we fear they would be. And so maybe if they ran more honestly and didn't do that, they would have to suffer the consequences of being outside of the regular consensus. And so therefore, the idea, the famous quote that hypocrisy is the tribute that vice pays to virtue. If they're hypocrites, that means that virtue remains something that we can all share. It's a general idea of what it means to be an American and live a responsible political life is. And so if they're hypocrites, that's a good thing, I would say. And if they're not, that might be a good thing politically because they will make it harder for them to get their way. But it's worse because it'll say that America is much more accepting of noxious and disgusting opinions that will, destroy the country over the long run.
I feel as if when we want to see the Overton window return to something, that was pre-woke, sort of, recognizable, acceptable ideas, and not radical ones, and even evil ones. But the truth is that when the Overton window shifts in the direction of extremism, it feels like a lasting shift. When people back away from extremism, it feels more temporary. You don't. You sort of can't close it back up entirely.
Okay. We have a two-part question here. DY writes, the funniest person on the show is Seth Mandel. I always laugh at his puns, sarcasm, and dry humor. Sometimes only one other panelist acknowledges the joke. If any of you missed them live but recognized later on a second listen. And relatedly, Larry asks, does Abe laugh?
Okay, so these are questions about Seth and Abe. So first of all, we are on a Zoom. We see each other. And you see this if you watch it on YouTube. And I can see Seth as we're going on. I can see wheels spinning in his head as a conversation is going on, and he is formulating a one-liner that he will then simply let go and lead and let go. And it's always hilarious. But I will say that he often doesn't. I can see it happening, but he doesn't telegraph sometimes that it's coming, and so it comes at a moment when it would almost be weird to laugh. But I agree that Seth's one-liners are a great highlight of the show. And as for Abe, not only does Abe laugh, but Abe Abe, like me, spends an inordinate amount of time watching ancient comedians, bits of comedy from the 1970s, 80s, and 90s that you can find on YouTube, to like revel in Don Rickles bits. Abe loves Howard Stern. I like Alan King. It's like this kind of weird world of, much of the entertainment that I think we both enjoy is laugh out loud material. So I don't know why you're getting the crushing morosity reputation here, Abe, but
Well, I'll say something on both that counts for both. Is just because we try to be very good about muting our mics when we're not speaking. And so if you watch us on YouTube, you will see laughter you don't hear on the podcast. You won't hear the laughter on YouTube either because the audio is not. But my point is that you will see what looks like people laughing and cracking jokes together on YouTube. But because we are so studious about keeping our mics muted when somebody else is talking, we don't think to unmute to laugh and then
provide
remute,
the laugh track,
right.
Yeah, we could be the laugh track, but
right. So you will see Abe mirthful and enjoying things if you watch on YouTube.
If I come across as humorless, it's because I respect the brand. I don't want to interfere with the crushing morosity. Who am I? I don't want to dilute this formula,
Okay.
Yes, and as Seth said, YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube. Next question. Another serious one. Alan Zeitlin asks, what would stop Tucker Carlson from running in a third party with the dual purpose of getting 5% and helping Democrats win and having televised forums and possible debates where he spread blood libels about Israel?
I can't see a reason why he wouldn't. I know Tucker. I think people, if you know, I hired Tucker basically for his first serious job in journalism. I was his editor for 2 years. He was not the person then that he is now. He's a funny, interesting. He even then was sort of a politically very complicated person, very conservative, but also very libertarian, didn't like cops, stuff like that. Interesting interplay in the mid 90s. The person he is now, the monster that he has become, I think a lot of this is gamesmanship. And so running for president is a very serious business. I seriously doubt that he would want to be president because he lives like a recluse somewhere in Maine, and you don't choose to live like that if you don't prefer solitude to immense amounts of company. And so I think the way he has structured his life would indicate that he will not, in the end, make the leap. And of course, if he did that, the only real purpose of doing that would be to elect a leftist, because he would, seize vote from the right. And I don't know if he'll want that. So I would say, on balance, he could do it, and it would have a small but meaningful effect. Jill Stein-like effect on 2028. But I would guess he won't.
Okay. Back to another more question of levity. Jesse asks, what is your favorite museum in the world, and which section would you linger on? I can also start out here with a slightly offbeat recommendation. A museum that I always recommend to people who visit our nation's capital is the Stephen S. Udvar-Hazy Center. It's a mouthful name. It's a part of the Air and Space Museum. It's out near Dulles Airport, so it's not inside the city. And it has an amazing, one of the best in the country, collections of aircraft and spacecraft, and it's very impressive. And one of the decommissioned space shuttles, the Space Shuttle Discovery, is on display there, and you can walk right up to it, stand right under it. And I remember being struck by the heat tiles on the underside of the space shuttle because of the Columbia disaster that was traced back to those heat tiles, those heat shields. But beyond that, it has ICBMs, it has old planes, it has planes from all eras. It's quite impressive. I highly recommend it.
I make a comparable recommendation, though it's not really a museum, but the Kennedy Space Center, in Cape Canaveral, which you can visit, by the way, if you're going to Orlando to Disney or to Universal. It's a 50-mile drive from it's an hour-long drive from the amusement parks, and it is awesome. One of the things they have is the Apollo 18 rocket that was never the Apollo 18, which was never fired, and like the space shuttle in Chantilly, Virginia, it hangs, and it's 250 feet long. So you walk the length of this missile, and then you think there would have been 3 people on it, and they would have been shot into space on this thing that's just hanging right over my head. What a piece of work is a man. How amazing is this? I have 2 other museums to mention. One in London is the Museum of Transport in Covent Garden, which tells the story of London by telling the story, and cities in general, by telling the story of how transportation worked in London before the construction of the underground, how people worked the river and traded goods on the river, and how London grew along the Thames, and then how the underground started to be built, and this amazing first in the world subway system that revolutionized all of urban life. And it's incredibly fun, and it particularly for children, it's just dazzling. And they have every double-decker bus model that was ever used for 120 years, and every kind of subway car and all of that. And so that's one. And then my favorite small museum, it's not actually a small museum, but my favorite out-of-the-way museum in the world is the Clark in Williamstown, Massachusetts, which is mostly American, though there's a lot of Renoirs. The Clarks were, like many cities were well-to-do capitalists of the early 20th century who started going to Paris and other places and buying incredibly cheap art up, and needed a place to put it, and they lived in Williamstown, or they had summered in Williamstown, and they decided to place their collection there. It's in the middle of nowhere. My daughter went to Williams College, so I've been there 10 times in the last 4 years. Hard to get to. Absolutely magnificent. A collection, an unparalleled collection of beauty, an incredibly wonderful building that is almost like a perfect museum setting, and well worth the trip if you are anywhere within 100 miles of it, and you can figure out how to spare yourself 3 or 4 hours to get there, and then you can basically see much of what it is in an hour. And it is just a breathtaking American institution.
I think I know that my favorite museum where I've had the most meaningful experiences is the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, particularly in the ancient section, because I lived near there for a number of years, so I really went a lot, and I also had a friend who dealt in the ancient work as he sold it and bought it, and so he would go with me and sort of give me a kind of like a crash course in it, and it coincided it happened at the same time that I was beginning to read the ancient Greece, the ancient Greeks and so on, and so it was this great. It stuck with me, and as I say, I rarely got past that section or very far past that section, because you're in almost an enclosed city, that represents civilization throughout its entire course. So I would stick there. Haven't been there a number of years, but it's phenomenal.
My wife and kids are there now, I think, as we speak.
They're
but they will stop. They will linger at the Egyptian section, and where the old pyramid is, and with the waters running around it. We always stop there. Everybody loves it. We know somebody who literally got engaged in that room.
I hate the Metropolitan, the British Museum, the Prado, the Louvre. I find them overwhelming and off-putting in the sheer spectacular size of them. I find them, intimidating and difficult to manage. And of course, the pathways through them, it's like worse than a casino trying to get from the craps table to your elevator, because they're so bizarrely set up like rabbit warrens, so that getting from one place to another is like an incredible challenge. And yet on the other hand, if there's something you need to see it there. But I am much more a fan and an inveterate goer to the smaller collection museums that don't sort of, say to you, here is the entirety of civilization. Where do you want to go first? It's just too much.
I was just to add to that, I will say that we were in Greece a few months ago in Athens. And so I highly recommend, all the museums that are attached to the various historical sites in Greece. Are pretty wonderful, but also if you go to places like the Temple of Poseidon, you will nowadays they have apps where you can look through your phone and it will reconstruct what used to be there in front of you, and you can walk around. I would not, at the Temple of Poseidon specifically, I would not walk very much while looking at your phone, because it's easy to go off a cliff there. But in general, to look at things, you can actually just move your phone away from your face and see it as it is now, and then put it up and sort of walk through anything where you can feel like you're walking through history is always stuff that catches me. But I just found that in Athens, all over the place, they for obvious reasons they concentrate on that. It was fun.
Okay. I think that's going to do it for us. So thank you very much for sending all your questions in. We're probably going to do another one of these soon, and hopefully by then I'll remember everyone's titles. So for John, Seth, and Abe, I'm Noam Blum. Keep the candle burning.